In a war of nations unprecedented in its sheer scale and volume of manpower, when one actually takes the time to zoom in, there are simply thousands of small untold stories that make you say, that really happened? Well, it really did happen, and in this amazing World War II story, we're going to be looking at William M. Miller and his guardian angel, Warren Felty. On the night of February 21st, 1940, the war beginning to take shape in Europe was a distant worry for young men such as Bill Miller. Miller, the Pennsylvania native, had just purchased his first car, and like most testosterone-pumped male adolescents, he wanted to see how fast his car could go. Joyriding at 2 AM, Miller had forgot that the melting snow would have by then seeped into the roadways and frozen into slippery sheets of ice. After flirting with up to 110 miles per hour, the inevitable eventually happened, and when Miller saw a corner too late, his brakes locked and he lost control of the car, which eventually hit a concrete culvert, sending him flying through the windshield and into a snowbank where he lay unconscious and dying. Luckily for him, a fellow youngster by the name of Warren Felty and his friend found Miller in the snowbank, at which point Felty placed Miller in his car and rushed him to hospital where he was in a coma for 4 days, but eventually made a good recovery. Miller continued to live his life vaguely aware of his savior in Warren Felty, leaving him with an eternal thankfulness for a man he thought he'd never see again. Well, hint hint, he did see Felty again, and in the most unlikely of circumstances. Fast forward 5 years, and Miller was unfortunate enough to be one of the half-starved POWs forced to undertake a march of 75 miles to Spremberg, Germany to avoid imminent liberation by the advancing Red Army. To quote Bill, "It was only the second day of marching and it seemed as if we had been on the road for a week. Everyone seemed to be in a daze. Friends who you had made in the camp didn't recognize you and wouldn't even talk to you. It was every man for himself. At this point, no one could help anyone. You were on your own." A mere 5 miles away from a stopping point, Miller could barely put one foot in front of the other and passed out in a snowbank from sheer exhaustion. But Miller escaped certain death yet again when, surprise surprise, none other than Warren Felty pulled him up to his feet. The two men, from the same town in Pennsylvania, had coincidentally both become B-17 pilots and had both been shot down and taken prisoner over Germany and were being held at Stalag Luft 3 in different compounds before the march. It was as if destiny brought the two together on the march, and after finding Miller in the snowbank, Felty helped his fateful friend reach the stopping place 5 miles ahead, which allowed him a critical period of rest that ultimately led him to surviving the war. This wasn't the end of their encounters, however, and amazingly, after the war, they ran into each other again. Miller was having breakfast on a roadside restaurant at Harrisburg and on the verge of losing his job as a local distributor for his company's products. A passing motorist felt compelled to stop at this restaurant he had never been to before, and lo and behold, Miller and Felty were reunited again. In just 2 hours, Felty had made arrangements with his own company to be the distributor Miller needed, and therefore Miller's job was saved from certain death, yet another time, albeit less traumatic, where Miller was bailed out by this enigmatic man who seemed to only show up at the right moments. So guys, does this story make you believe in fate, or do you believe this sequence of events was just freak chance? Let me know in the comments section below. I don't know, I personally believe it's fate, but in a world of statistics, who knows? We'll never know, but it's an interesting story nonetheless, and I hope you guys did enjoy it. Just before you go, if you do want to help support the channel, be sure to check out my Patreon link in the description below. Any dollar really helps with quality and quantity of videos produced. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.